making Merida's blue dress. I'm using McCall's pattern 9456. This is the start of doing a mock-up, and I used the exact pieces that came with the pattern, although there was a bit too much excess on the side, so I've had to take those in. And also I need to square off the neck a bit, add some more up there a bit. I also want more in my skirt. There isn't really a lot, it's hanging a bit too straight when I need a full swishy skirt like she does. So when I put it on, Mum marked where my waist is with some pins, as these are going to be my new pattern pieces, and then we're going to flare it out at the waist, so we'll be adding probably 3 inches on, maybe more, we're not sure yet, but there we go. So again, we took it in at the back as well, just so it hugs me and gives a nice shape. Okay, I'm now making my main dress, and I already did a quick mock-up earlier, and you can just see some red fabric underneath to make the square shape piece. It goes down the front and the back of her, but we're using the other pattern pieces as a template. But this time I want a bit more room in my dress from the waist onwards, and I wanted it to come out from there to there by 3 inches. So we've marked 3 inches, done a slight curve, and then gradually brought it in to where my waist was. So that'll be where I'll be cutting, where those pins are. We'll be doing that to all the pieces, so every single piece will come out by 3 inches. And you have to do that to both sides on every single piece if that's what you want to do, depending on how much room you want in your dress. The fabric I bought for my dress was called Aqua Truella 80% cotton, 20% wool fabric. And this was the seller. It was a very nice lady. She actually did me a deal on 5 meters, which is probably a bit more than what I needed, but it's always best to buy more than what you need. Okay, we're making a facing for our front section, so it makes it nice and neat and tidy. And to do this, you first have to pin. Now, all you really need to concentrate on is the top bit. You don't need to worry about anything down here. It's just important that you pin this down around your edge. Next, we just have to cut out around the shape, like so. Okay, you should now have a small section the same shape as your top half, like so. This is the new front piece. We've now shaped the top to that square shape. So this is what the new piece looks like. Next I'll be putting all my pieces together.
Okay, we're now going to do alterations to the main dress, basically sticking to the pattern that we're going to be using. I've marked out a section here where I'm going to have a square section taken out. I've also narrowed the shoulder as well because it mustn't be too high towards the neck, and it's quite a narrow shoulder before it reaches the sleeve. And then for the seams, we're going to pull those in a little bit to make it a bit tighter. Keep the back seam straight, and it's all the other seams that you have to change. So this is the back side, and this is the side seam, which comes in quite a way to the waist to accentuate the waist on that. And then if you just turn around, Trace, and this is the front. I haven't made any alterations at all to the front section because that seems to fit quite well. And then for the top, there's going to be a slight alteration with the neck coming out a little bit and finishing there, which matches up with the back piece. And of course, taking a little bit off the shoulder off the back, you've got to take the equivalent off the front down the sleeve, like so. Where the pins are at the moment, that will be the finished edge. So now we're going to do all those alterations. Okay, now I've had to do a recut. I've reshaped the front and reshaped the sleeves. Now that's cut to how I want it to be. I've had a practice at putting the sleeve in, which I'm quite happy with, and it will need to be shortened, of course. And while I was at it, I also recut the back, which is slightly higher than the front. You don't want it going down too low. And as well as doing a facing for the front, this has been slightly recut now to the new design. I will also need facing for the back as well. So using the dress as a template, you'll need to cut out. It doesn't matter too much how far down you go. Hang on, let's just think this through. Got it the wrong way around. Might help if I did it the right way. There we go. That's the new shape coming down from the shoulders. This is the back facing.
Next thing we're going to do is we've got our facings for the dress. We've got the front facing and two separate back facing pieces. Next thing we have to do is join them at the seams, because that will be where the shoulder is. So just literally pin it in place. Like so, and then just sew it across here and here. And then you'll have to do exactly the same with your main pattern pieces. Just join them at the shoulder seam. Next thing is to give it the usual press with the iron. Open out your seams. This is the facing we're doing. Next we do the same thing with the shoulder seams, starting out those flaps, make them nice and flat. Next, as you can see, I sewn the shoulder seams together, so the front of the dress and the back of the dress pieces over there. Next we get our facing, which is now being sewn and ironed. Next we're going to pin this facing to our dress and then tack it down and then sew it all the way around. Obviously don't sew right around your back because you'll sew your opening together. So just be careful of that, please, folks. Right, we're now sewing the facing down, and in all the corners we've snipped so that when we turn it inside out it's easier to do so. Just turn that underneath, and then that just gives you a nice neat edge all the way around. And then what you'll do next is just give it a flat iron. This should be what it looks like after it's been pressed with the iron. So you can see that just gives a really nice neat edge. It's a lot better than just trying to turn over the edge and having a sewing line there, a row of stitches you can see where you've turned it over. It's a much nicer way of doing it. And at the back I've just pinned that there, it overlaps. Next thing to do is to put in my other panels. I put some pins here on the side just to hold that bit of facing in while I'm putting the rest of the dress together. Okay, I've sewn my panels together apart from the side. We've left that one out for now because we're going to do our sleeve a slightly different way. So for now we haven't sewn up the sides. We'll show you a different way of putting in the sleeve, although the most common way is how we did on the undergarment, underdress. First of all we get the sleeve, and we got the dress the right way out, and we're finding the centre point on the sleeve, and you should see we've already put our ease stitch in as we did on the chemise, and we just put a pin there and holding it through all the layers at that centre point. Next thing to do is match the notches as described before. Okay, next we do as we did before. We get the gathering stitch, and we don't want too many gathers, so we're trying to attempt to do the fitted sleeve. So we just got to do tiny little gathers.
And this is what your sleeve should look like. The easing stitch is just to ease the fabric slightly together without causing any pleats or puckering when you come to sew it.
Next thing I'm going to do is tack all the way along just directly underneath the easing stitch, because then I'll be sewing at least a centimetre below that, so I want to make sure this is all tacked so I can take my pins out.
Right, we've now sewn the sleeves in, and I've put the dress on inside out so that I can get a better idea of what it looks like, and I think the sleeve is quite good. I'm now going to make a mark as to how long the sleeve is going to be. Don't want it too short, but then I don't want it too long. And I'm quite happy with the fit of the sleeve, so I shan't be changing that. And while I have the dress on, I've now pinned the side seam, and that seems to be quite good, so I'm going to leave that seam as it is. And then following that, the next thing will be to shorten the dress to make room for the valance at the bottom.
Quick show of the dress the right way out. Sleeves are now being turned under. And it's also being shortened, the bottom already. And we've left the back open for a good reason, because when we do our valance in a second, we need the dress to be fully open, and if we sew up the back seam now, it's going to make it a lot harder to make the valance, because you would have joined the whole of the back up. So anyway, this is my beige coloured Duchess satin, which I've decided to settle on for the valance at the bottom of the dress. I got this off a market stall, although you can buy Duchess satin very easily from a lot of fabric companies, and a lot of them will do samples if you want one to get a colour match.
We're now going to do the back seam, which is going to be laced, so we're going to put some eyelets down the back, and I want to put a little bit of stiffener in first where the seam is going to be. So the seam that we need to sew is about 3/4 of an inch, that's about 1.5 centimetres to make it fit. So I'm going to pin down some medium stiffener, just sew on stiffener, not the iron on, and then I'm just going to turn the seam back, tack that into place, and then I'm going to sew it down.
Next thing I want to do is create a fill-in piece underneath, so that when my garment is laced up at the back, you won't see my white chemise showing through underneath. You will see a fill-in piece, which is basically a strip that I've cut out here, and you basically do the same as I did with the Velcro on the chemise, where you measure from the top to the opening and you add 2 centimetres onto the length, and then you measure how wide it is, and you must add extra for there as well. This one is about 10 centimetres wide, which is probably a little bit wider than what we need, but we'd rather do that than find out after we sew it in now that we haven't made it wide enough or long enough. We're just going to go and overlock the edges around the whole of the piece.
Right, we've now overlocked the edges, and I've just turned over the top just to neaten it with a bit of sewing. Now what we're going to do is attach it to the seam, whereabouts I put the pins in there to hold the stiffener. Okay, so I'm just going to line up the seams and then repin it into place like that. And do that all the way down. Right, the way to attach this is to run a sewing line just about where I've put the pins all the way down to the bottom. I've put a mark here because this is exactly where the seam starts for the back of the dress. You don't want to sew any lower than that. Then what you're going to do is angle the sewing machine in at 45 degrees towards the seam line, but stop when you get there, and then we're going to tie off the thread.
Okay, I've now sewn down the side as I was explaining, and I came in here and tied it off with a knot. Now we've still got the other side to do, so I'm going to be sewing right down on the edge again, and then when I get to here I'll be coming in again in a V like this, so from there to there. This is what it should look like after you've finished.
The next step is to sew the velvet ribbon onto the neckline, and and stop the edging before you get to the placket.
Next I'm going to decorate the trim using this braiding that I got from my local fabric shop, and I'm just playing around at the minute, but you can sort of see what I'm going to do, and do a fancy swirl there and then carry on over the back. So that's what I'm going to do next. Okay, just showing off the finished trim at the top of the dress here. This is kind of what it's looking like at this point, minus the trim at the bottom.
We've now put on the 3mm eyelets on both sides, so the dress is now ready for lacing up and trying on.
Okay, for making a valance, now this is why I said it's probably not a good idea to sew up the back seam, because you need to spread the whole dress out onto your fabric. I have 2.5 meters of fabric here, and although this is a lot more than by 2 inches than what I'll need, I only need about 10, but we're going to make it 12 inches long from there to the bottom, because don't forget, when we sew it onto this seam on the dress, we're going to lose a good centimetre of that as well, so we'll lose that tiny bit. And plus we'll be turning over the edge at the end, and then you'll lose a little bit more of that width again. So, but obviously you've got to make sure that you've got enough for your 12 inches all the way around the dress. So we've got to make sure we have enough room from there to this edge and all the way round. And Mum's just marking out 12 inches at the moment using some chalk. And as the dress has a curve as well, you have to curve your valance with it. If you try and cut out a straight strip and try and attach it onto the curve of a dress, you'll find it almost impossible to do. So you do that all the way around, and we're just marking the curve of the dress as we go, because we'll need to cut along there. And then just carry on marking from there outwards your 12 inches, or however long you want it to be. Just remembering your turnips and the seam allowances. So once we've done that, we'll be cutting the strip out. But chalk is very good because it easily brushes off afterwards, so you don't need to worry. Okay, this is what it should look like after you've cut around it. Next thing you'll need is some trace down paper, which is ingenious because you can put your trace down paper on your fabric, and then you place your pattern over the top and just draw through your pattern. I've been starting here and I've anchored my image down with some weight so it doesn't move. Basically I've got my fabric and the red stuff is the trace down paper, and I've got my image on top. Now I'm using one of these embossing tools, and you basically just draw around your eyelet line, applying a certain amount of pressure, and then once you trace through, your pattern appears on the other side, like so, as you can just about see. That just gives me my outline for when I come to paint it. Okay, this is what it should look like after you traced your image. Makes it a lot easier to paint round. I'm using this acrylic paint, antique gold, and as you see at the moment I'm just in the middle of painting and I've nearly reached the end. Okay, I've just been busy sewing the valance onto the bottom of the dress. And now we've got the seam on the valance still open, so we just need to sew that together. That's at the back. We've got the back seam of the valance here. Where I've pinned it is where it's got to be sewn, right down to the bottom. Okay, we've now got to open up the flaps on the seam and give them a good press with the iron. And I'm going to show you next after that what we do with the gap we left here and here. Okay, now just sew up the gap from where you left off here, making sure the seam flaps are flat on both sides. Go right across and finish up where you started. I'm now decorating the bottom of the valance with these 6mm flat back pearls, and I'm just using basic fabric glue. You can get these pearls off eBay. There was 500 in each packet and I bought about 8 packets. And I recommend using a very old brush and not one of your best brushes for gluing. This is the finished decorated panel. In total, I have stuck on 2,176 flat back pearls, and it has taken me 2.5 days. Just a very quick look over the final dress. Moving on to the side and around the back. Okay, I'm just finishing painting up my belt. I've used the same method as before, where I used the trace down paper, trace the image, and now I'm painting over it.
Okay, we're now going to show how the belt was put together. First of all, you thread the buckle onto your belt, then take the belt around the back to the front and work out where it will sit comfortably on your hips, like so. When you're happy with where it goes, then put 2 stud fasteners on the one side, then on the other side put 2 more stud fasteners, one each side of the buckle bar, and then clip it together. Like so. Let's do a little bit of readjustment there. And that's your belt. Step back trace. There you go. All done. Okay, you ready for your final pose trace? And here she is. Merida is now finished.
please visit my website for more written and photo tutorials at www.tracyscostumingworld.weebly.com. And on here I have the photos, the videos, costumes, and please feel free to write a comment on my website. Thank you.